BittBoy handheld game console is a fantastic way into retro gaming. It allows you to have around 20 classic game consoles and computers and hundreds of arcade cabinets in your pocket. What could be nicer than that? Well, if you're me, pretty much nothing. Retro gaming has been a trend in gaming and computing since the 90s, when the first rash of 80s computer game consoles were able to be simulated on the first really powerful computers. Once it was possible to simulate obsolete systems with software, the first emulators became a legitimate gaming platform, removing the need for owning a possibly expensive piece of vintage hardware. Okay, so also the first wave of internet-based piracy websites started too, with downloadable ROMs for the consoles which were being emulated. While the grey area of what you could and couldn't share on the internet persisted, it was the Wild West for retro gaming. It's still technically illegal to copy and share intellectual property on the internet. It always has been and always will be, but there are still grey areas where computer games are concerned, and that is abandonware. Much of the game software of the 80s and 90s had been left high and dry. Either the companies have gone bust, the designers of the software have left the industry or died, and the consoles which serve the games up to the public have been replaced, upgraded, or just been lost to time. Disclaimer, we here at Make Tech Easier cannot condone software piracy in any form, so if you're looking to find out how to pirate games, this is not the place. So having got that out of the way and leaving all legal considerations aside for the moment, the appetite for retro gaming has continued, and in some places in the world where copyright is, shall we say, a little more flexible, there is a booming business in game consoles and handhelds which give you that retro gaming fix with none or few of the technical or legal hassles. One of those countries is China, and one of those handhelds is the amazing BittBoy. A new boy for games. The BittBoy console, sometimes called the Pocket Go, comes in a variety of form factors in designs which ape the handheld consoles of the past. The most popular one looks like a small Nintendo Game Boy, a popular retro gaming form factor as you can see from these other types. Usually when you buy one of these handhelds, it comes stocked with as many legal, or at least legal in the country of manufacture, games from the past. This device has a Linux operating system, more of that in a moment, and a suite of emulators for Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo NES, SNES, Sega Master System and Mega Drive, Atari 2600 and Lynx, NEC PC Engine, Sony PlayStation PSX or PS1, MAME, Neo Geo, WonderSwan and DOSBox. That's a very comprehensive suite of emulators covering most of the popular retro gaming platforms and pretty much the first 20 years of console and arcade gaming. There are more emulators available, but that requires an upgrade, and more about that in a sec. Now, while it comes with a very good selection of games, which I would probably be happy with forever in a pinch, it does carry within it the possibility of adding new games, but it's not entirely simple. Also, there are a few gotchas in there, and I'll be covering those too. So join me now as I take you into the hidden recesses of the BittBoy and teach you how to make it last forever and be a happy and healthy device. Why add games? There's a number of reasons why you might want to add other games to your BittBoy. Firstly, you might have played the ones it comes with and gotten bored with them. It happens. More likely, like the majority of retro gaming enthusiasts, there was a particular game console or games you had when you were a kid and you want to return to them for a nostalgic trip down memory stick lane. Either way, the BittBoy as it stands is not complete unless it has games you want to play. How do you find games? There are many places on the internet to find game ROMs, but I would caution you about doing that for two reasons. The first is that the games on the BittBoy are legal, or at least legal in the country of manufacture. Once you stray from the path, the legality of your handheld console is questionable. Secondly, the vast majority of websites on the internet containing pirated games or ROMs are not your friend. They are full of viruses, ransomware, spyware and malware. Unless you can find a site that is free of cyber threats and wishes you no ill, you're taking your life in your hands just downloading pirated games and ROMs from the web willy-nilly. Legitimate sources of ROMs are mostly to do with copying your own ROMs, which as the owner you are mostly legally able to do. There are many resources and hardware available on the internet which enable you to do this. In this respect, Google is your friend. Under the lid. The games on a BittBoy inhabit a microSD card in the top of the machine. Getting this out can be a little bit fiddly, and be warned the spring is a little bit strong, so the possibility of pinging your card across the room is very real. This is a very small card and you don't want to do that unless you want to lose it. Firm pressure with a fingernail releases the card and you can then insert it into a USB adapter for inserting into your desktop or laptop. But can you just read and write to it? The answer is yes and no. Initially you might not be able to see the SD card on your desktop machine because of the tricky way the cards are organised. Linux is the operating system used by the BittBoy, but it uses a dual boot partition for Linux and FAT32, and sometimes it might not be visible on a Windows PC or Mac. If it doesn't show up, then the chances are you have to make sure the main FAT32 partition has a drive letter. Obviously, if you have a Linux computer handy, then it's a lot easier, as it will read the Linux portions of the card natively. Right click on the main partition on the drive and make sure it has a drive letter assigned. Once the main partition is recognised by the system, you can start copying games to the various directories, but we'll get to that in a moment. Making new cards and upgrading. The biggest problem you have once you get the games on the SD card just the way you want it is that the format of the SD card is unusual and fiddly and not easy to copy. How do you make a backup in case the card becomes corrupted by a sudden shutdown? This is a very real possibility. Although the machine will reboot as gracefully as it can after a sudden shutdown, you should, if you can, shut it down properly via the menus to avoid corrupting the cards. But this is hard sometimes, as some games don't run properly and jam the machine up, making manual shutdown impossible. Raspberry Pi retro gamers know this problem all too well, and the only solution is backup. There's other reasons you might want to make new SD cards for your BittBoy, and that is that newer versions of the firmware on the SD contain more emulators like Amiga, Vectrex, Game & Watch, Sinclair Spectrum and Commodore 64. A lot of these emulations are experimental and not all ROMs are created equal, so you may not be able to get them to work 100% of the time. You'll have to do a lot of experimentation and tryouts, but I guess that's what being an enthusiast is all about. But let's cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, let's just cover how on a basic level you can create new cards for the BittBoy. To build a new card for the BittBoy, there's a couple of bits of software you're going to need. Minitool Partition Wizard and Win32 Disk Imager. You'll also need to download the newest firmware from the official site, which at the time of writing is version 3.5. You will also need a microSD card with a capacity of 8 GB or above. Okay, got all that? Then let's begin. To start with, wipe any partitions you have on the SD card with Minitool Partition Wizard. Right click on the SD disk entry in Minitool and scroll up to Format. Select FAT32. You'll be warned that this action will destroy all the data on the disk. Say OK. Click Apply to apply the changes and wait a bit until it's done. Close the Minitool software for now. We'll come back to that in a bit. Next, open the Win32 Disk Imager utility. With this, we'll burn the BittBoy disk image to the SD card. When you download it, it will be compressed into a 7Z file, so you'll have to decompress it with some kind of 7Z decompression tool. Link in the description. You will have to do this twice, as once the directory is uncompressed, the image file will be compressed inside that. Sounds complicated, but basically you have to get the file so it is an IMG file, so you'll have to do it twice. Now in Win32 Disk Imager, select this image and burn it to the SD card using the right button. You will again be warned about trashing the disk, but forge ahead because you trust that it's going to work okay. Once that is done, you should have 5 partitions in total: boot, root FS, Linux swap, main and some unallocated space. Boot and main are FAT and FAT32 partitions, and root FS and swap are of course Linux. An additional optional step is to give all the unallocated space to the main partition to make room for any more games on your card. You can do this with the Minitool Partition Wizard. Right click on the main partition, scroll up to Extend, drag the slider fully to the right to give all the remaining dead space to the main partition. Now you can copy all your ROMs to the respective directories on the SD card. I recommend having a directory on your PC with all your ROMs in their respective directories so you can make a new disk and copy them over as a block anytime you need to make a new disk. And there you have it. Once you've upgraded the firmware and have a new brain in the BittBoy, you have a few more emulators to enjoy. Sound gotchas. Okay, so as wonderful as this upgrade is to the BittBoy, there are a few things which crop up as a consequence of this upgrade. First among these is an unfortunate volume bug. With the old firmware, you could just adjust the brightness and volume by pressing and holding the select button and using the fire buttons to raise and lower the intensity. This has been broken slightly by this upgrade, and if you try to set the brightness, it works, but the volume, not so much. You can set the volume down, but not up. This means your games are now silent. and you can't get out of it. There is, however, a workaround. The new keys for volume, and this works mostly in-game, are the R key plus the up and down on the D-pad. Another thing you will notice is there are some Doom mods added to the system. This is very exciting as there's some great total conversions like Alien Doom, Batman Doom, Army of Darkness Doom, Doom 64, a clone of the Doom on the N64, Ultimate Simpsons Doom and Wolfen Doom. Yay! Your excitement is slightly curbed immediately after that by the fact that out of the box most of these don't work. Sad face. The one thing that's not very well documented is that you need the retail version of the Doom 2 main WAD file in order to make these work, and for copyright reasons obviously this is not possible to ship with the console. However, as Doom 2 is very definitely abandonware by this point, a quick internet search for doom2.wad will easily provide you with the file you need. Drop this into the directory /games/ccdoom and the Doom mods should now work. Okay, your mileage may vary, but on mine, not all of them actually worked. Partly this is a conversion problem, and also I feel that to run Doom 2 in this little handheld is a little bit underpowered. Still, it's impressive that it can do it at all. This comes under the heading of experimental features, I guess, and perhaps when there is a later version of the firmware, such things will be a little bit more shipshape. On an allied subject, it is another mostly undocumented feature, like most things in the BittBoy, but to quit DOSBox there is a hidden key press. It took me ages to find it, but you have to hold Start and press B. This brings up the OSK, or on-screen keyboard, and you can then press the quick key for the game you're using. Obviously it helps to know what this is before you go in, but there are some common ones like Q or Escape or Control C. You'll figure it out. Before I discovered this feature I was just turning off the console to get out of DOSBox, but that's a bad idea. As previously stated, you can corrupt the card if you do that. Another couple of things about DOSBox before we move on is that I really hope they fix that bug which makes it impossible to do sound in DOS games. It doesn't really matter how hard you try, you can't make this happen, so don't waste your time. I have already, so you don't have to. Finally, adding games to DOSBox is not a simple matter of dropping files into the PC directory and they are automatically added. No, you have to explicitly add them to a menu called Launchbox. Navigate to the Games PC Launchbox directory and edit a file called launchbox.txt. There is already a game preloaded in there and you just have to copy and paste it and adapt it to your new games. You just have to specify the directory and the name of the exe file and you are good to go. Included games. As well as the emulated games, there are a lot of great legal games preloaded onto the card. As there is literally no documentation for any of these games, I thought I would let you know about a couple of the other games included and details of how to get them working. Open Bore is Beats of Rage, an open source clone of fighting game Streets of Rage. There are loads of games that run on this platform, but it doesn't run right out of the box. I'll put a link to the details of how to get games for that in the description. Also, there is an Outrun engine, a version of the Outrun arcade platform that requires extra files to run. You need to grab some ROM files in order to make this happen. It's optimized to run on the BitBoy and it runs really, really well. So anyway, yes, the Outrun engine is a version of the Outrun arcade platform and requires extra files to run. I'll put a link to the details in the description. Okay, that about wraps it up. Emulation is a fabulous and convenient way to enjoy retro gaming, and the BitBoy and its little and big brothers are a great pocket-sized platform to enable you to have this experience on the go. Now I've taught you how to make new cards for it, you'll be enjoying the games for many years to come. Okay, as always, thank you so much for watching. We fully appreciate your support. That's all for now. I'll see you next time.